Donald Trump is in China, and particularly because of his long history and recent history of saying extremely inflammatory things about China, its economy, and the fact that it was the place where they came up with the hoax for climate change, you might think that during this trip we would have a fiery press conference where they would ask him hard questions about China. But that is not going to happen. Caitlin Collins tweeted from a conversation with Sarah Sanders about this, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, asked why he didn't take questions from reporters today. Sarah Sanders said it was at the Chinese insistence there were no questions today. And so theoretically, it would be nice, as he has had in all of those other countries, that he and the foreign leader would come together and be asked questions from the media of the US and the host country. But they don't want to do that because it's China and they have at best an extremely tense relationship with press, free or otherwise. And so unless you push them to have a free press present at the meeting, it's not going to happen. And we know this because in the past it has happened. Presidents Bill Clinton and George W. Bush insisted on taking questions from reporters at their respective press conferences in this same situation. When President Barack Obama visited China back in 2014, Xi, under duress, took one lone question from a member of the press belonging to a Chinese state newspaper. But at least in that case, Barack Obama was there to answer questions as well. Jay Carney, former press secretary, said, "I once had to tell Chinese officials that President Obama would not show up for the press avail unless there would be a Q&A, and they backed down." And they did that because we put forward some strength and insisted that they do it. Trump didn't do that. This is the guy who said, he's the one who's gonna get them to respect us again. He's gonna go abroad and be strong, and he just folds, like a flan. And so we don't have any questions. And so, it would be nice for the Chinese media to be able to ask him questions. Maybe our reporters would be able to finally get some answers out of the leadership of China as well.
What's the question do you think the Chinese president didn't want to hear from anyone? They said particularly they have an issue with foreign media. It's like, well, there's something that they may
questions
ask.
about human rights, questions about some of their economic development strategies.
Well, like, did you two talk about the 15 to 20 different rallies that the U.S. president conducted during the entire campaign, where he said, "You're money manipulators. You made up global warming. You're stealing from us. I'm gonna come and I'm gonna kick some ass." Did he kick your ass back in the meeting?
Well, we actually, why don't we go to the video, because we've got an interesting new spin on that strategy. A video that was found by this guy, JR. Let's take a look at that.
Both the United States and China will have a more prosperous future if we can achieve a level economic playing field. Right now, unfortunately, it is a very one-sided and unfair one, but I don't blame China. After all, who can blame a country for being able to take advantage of another country for the benefit of its citizens? I give China great credit.
Everyone who was in that meeting,
read that off a piece of paper.
Everyone in that meeting was like, "Is he talking about right now?" Because we just totally took advantage of him right before he came back out here in the statements.
By the way, so he's reading this, again, they don't like teleprompters, so he's reading off a piece of paper. How did they write the name of the country for him to pronounce it China? Yeah, and so look, I guess this is sort of being more diplomatic, aside from the whole anti-media thing.
Yeah, this qualifies as high diplomacy for him.
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
I mean, this is, and just to go back to your first point, I think they're all too happy, the White House, that the restrictions on the press are what they are in China, so that they don't have to have their guy out there riffing with some question that is asked in a press conference, even in a controlled media situation. But yeah, this is big diplomacy for Donald Trump, that he turned down the heat a little bit. In fact, he was much tougher on the Japanese really than he was on the Chinese.
Yeah, and look, we can all think of a lot of really uncomfortable questions they could have asked. They could have asked him. So, do you still believe that guy over there invented climate change? that would be an interesting thing for him to respond to. The currency manipulation, what they would do if China didn't stop manipulating its currency. How are your factories making your ties and suit jackets? How are they doing? They're down the street. There would be a lot of really interesting questions.
Well, I can see who's not going to be invited into the press pool.
No, probably not.
So the question becomes: is he weak and he bowed down to a foreign leader like they always said that Obama always did, or is it they talked backstage and said, you know what, there's a good chance for me not to speak to the media because I don't like doing it either, because we know how Trump is. I read a story from February about how the Chinese president who came in late in 2012, he has, of course, the state media, and he looks for loyalty. I'm reading a couple pieces, and I just want you to think about how this is comparable to the way our president is. There was photographs from this particular state-run media. Photographs showed fawning journalists crowding around Mr. Xi, who sat in the anchor's desk on the state television network. Does that look like a network Trump was on? With fawning journalists that go, oh, thank you, Mr. President.
With him?
Hannity. The Chinese news media, it also exists to serve as a propaganda tool for the Communist Party, and it must pledge its fealty to Mr. Xi. It also said that he looks for particular loyalty from military leaders and other important figures since the whole last year.
Yeah.
So the point being, he needs loyalty. Who's all about loyalty? He needs a media that makes sure they tell the good stories about what's happening. That's also in this article. I was like, man, this isn't even like a mistake. I thought maybe they were like, oh, we don't know the history of them trying to force this lack of media communication. Maybe they're just stupid. They probably sat back and talked and said, you know, we both have the same agenda here, or at least we want to get to the same endpoint of not answering any questions. This is great. We're getting along perfectly. Who knew that we're exactly the same?
They don't even need to have that conversation, of course. You just know that that's going to proceed. But I was struck by the same thing, that Donald Trump has to be looking at Xi and going, you know, this is the guy and the setup that I want, right? He's got a media that he completely controls. He is baked into the system now, so he controls everything. I mean, it's an authoritarian regime, and honestly, I mean, it's a kingdom, and that's what Donald Trump wanted.
Yeah.
So I think this China thing, he just looks over at Xi, and it's like a wet dream. He's you know, he wishes he were here.
He's like,
he wishes he were the Chinese premier. Yeah.
And look at back domestically, we've got that situation with the Justice Department pressuring AT&T and Time Warner that if they're going to be able to do their merger, they have to sell off a random company, CNN, which is fake news, to be fair.
That's right. I don't know. We need you to sell something like CNN, right?
Just sell CNN.
All of a sudden, this administration, which cares nothing about this sort of thing, it's a free market after all. I mean, mergers happen all the time. That should be, you know. Anyway, we get to that story, but
exactly.
But yes, that he wants his version of what the Chinese president has.
Yeah. Now, we also have heard reports that there's a series of agreements that they've come to that are supposed to amount to $250 billion of increased economic activity between the two countries. If that actually happens, that's probably great for both countries. That sounds good. But we also heard that Carrier wasn't going to ship a bunch of their jobs abroad, and we just found out again today that they're shipping hundreds more. And so we've heard these things before, so we have to, give it some time, see if it actually happens. But one random thing that, just to close this out, that Trump could have done perhaps is, in this particular country, in China, obviously there's a lot of freedoms that we enjoy they do not have. And one of the things they don't have is the same sort of access to a lot of forms of social media that there are crackdowns on and all of that. And then Twitter is certainly one of those in China. For a president who spends 22% of his day on Twitter, he could push on that topic perhaps. Think about all the followers you could get, Donald, if you just had the entirety of the population of China suddenly signing on.
Now, see, I don't know if what's the degree of this story, but they said he had some kind of technology that was allowed to tweet while he's there.
Yeah, so, he can, but why did you need that technology?
That's the kind of person he is. He's like, as long as I get it, shit about anybody else.
That is probably true.
Look, there's no aspect of this trip that's really designed to push back on China in any way. He wanted to get concessions to China, or at least begin something with China on Korea. And that was bizarre because, as you know, they say, well, hey, we're already on it. Believe me, we're committed to the denuclearization of North Korea. And then he wanted something on trade. He wanted to make those remarks, which we've just heard, and they were a back massage compared to what he did to the Japanese. And yet we have a much bigger trade deficit with the Chinese than we did the Japanese. So it made no sense. He I think, is just moving through the situation. Is just trying to photo op it in essence.
Help us build independent media together. Come join us, tytnetwork.com/join.